The GeoGebra applet you see in front of you is very similar to the one in the previous video, except this one we're using an open interval. You'll notice that the point AF of A has an open circle at it. That means that that point itself is not part of the interval. Things that get close to it and are on the line are, but the actual point A and F of A is not in the interval. Same thing with the point A and F of B. It's not part of this graph. The point B is not in the interval. This is an open interval. And this really can change in a lot of ways how we read extrema over exactly the same interval. That is, whether the interval is open or closed. In this case, we have a relative maximum near -2. We have a relative minimum near a half. We have no absolute, nor do we have no absolute maximum, nor do we have an absolute minimum. When we look at the points A and F of A, since they're not actually in the interval, and this interval is open, that says that if we look just in the x direction and we approach A from the right hand side, we can get as close to A as we want to. We can keep getting closer and closer and closer, but we can't ever actually get to A. What that in turn means is that F of A can get closer and closer and closer, or the function value I should say, y can get closer and closer and closer to F of A, but it can't ever actually get there. So we can choose numbers as close to A as we want, therefore we can get y to be as close to F of A as we want, but we can't ever actually get there. There's always some number that's a little bit closer. We can always kind of split the distance in half, if you will. That means we don't ever find an absolute maximum or a minimum. Same thing happens on the other end when we look at B and F of B. Since this is open, we can get arbitrarily close to the value of B. We can get arbitrarily close to the value of F of B, but we can't ever actually get there, so we never actually get to a maximum or a minimum. Now, if we change the endpoints here and we do something like this, now the relative minimum that we have near 0.5 is also going to be an absolute minimum. The relative maximum is still just a relative maximum, and there is no absolute or global maximum on this interval, but we do now pick up a global minimum. If I change the B, bring it down to about here, now my relative maximum is also a global maximum. My relative minimum is also a global minimum. So we can have absolute minima and absolute maxima on open intervals, but we don't have to have them. If I just simply adjust these endpoints a little bit, I create intervals where we don't get absolutes, but we do get relatives. Kind of interesting. Once again, you'll have a chance to take a look at this app in the next page of the lesson. You'll be asked to try to see if you can arrange the endpoints to get a variety of different combinations of extrema, both relative and absolute. See what you can do with that. Make sure you understand how these things work together and the differences between finding these things on both open and closed intervals.